Hello, and welcome, actual magicians and guests, to the channel, particularly if you're a new guest. Hello, Melissa, and welcome to you, and thank you again, as ever, to Tony for moderating the live sessions. We're going to do an hour this evening, this afternoon, this morning, depending on where you are. Hello, Lee. And we're just going to talk about tarot, do a couple of readings maybe, take any questions, and just have a general discussion about tarot, Western esotericism, Kabbalah, alchemy, theosophy, hermeticism, chaos magic, grimoire magic, ancient Egyptian magic, witchcraft, Wicca, hedge witchery, Zen druidry. The list is endless, basically, as far as Western esotericism goes. Someone actually asked a really good question in the community tab on the channel about if I could go back and obviously I'm 60 now, but if I could go back and choose one particular path, which path would I choose, and what regrets would I have for not having chosen that singular path? And I thought it's an interesting question because it brings into mind all of the questions about what exactly is our path, what is our tradition, what is our defined subject area, even our hobby. When people say that they're a tarot card reader, how do people respond to when you say that you read tarot? Do you have friends and family who are fairly knowledgeable, comfortable with it, people who you would never say it to anyway and don't really need to? People who are vaguely curious. I have a mix of those people, and sometimes I forget just how people see tarot really from the outside. So one interesting question. I'll come back to that tradition question in a moment, but one interesting question that I always feel weird about being asked is, oh, do you believe in the tarot then? That seems to be a fairly common question, like, do you believe in the tarot? And it's like, yeah, well, I can see it, it's here. I also believe in McDonald's and automobiles and the clouds and everything else. And I sometimes ask people, what do you mean by believe in tarot? And then it gets to a more interesting question, which is, oh, well, do you believe it works? And then I sometimes say something along the lines of, if you think about that question, it's interesting, because if I believed it worked, then that's obvious, that's straightforward, that doesn't answer any particular question. Yes, I believe in this. And if you think or even suspect, in order to ask the question, that I don't believe that it works, then you must think that I'm doing this for some other reason, that I'm writing books or charging for readings, or I have an interest in it. And I don't believe in it, which would be sort of psychologically somewhat suspect. So it's an odd question, but it does sometimes, I guess, we have to explain how we believe that tarot works and what we mean by works. Do we mean that we can predict the future? Do we mean that that it's for self-insight? Do we believe that it's a magical thing that summons demonic entities whenever we use it, and it needs to be kept in a special box? Otherwise, it's like, people get their knowledge about tarot from horror films and stuff. So yeah, there's a wide range, isn't there, really, about people's expectations and how we can explain tarot to people who do ask, because I never ever force my explanation on people. If people aren't interested, I'm absolutely fine with that. I'm not a preacher for tarot at all. Birds is saying in the chat, I get asked for free readings. Yeah, sometimes I get asked to pull a card. I think people are used to on TikTok readings for the collective and pull a card sort of thing. I'll pull you a card for a like, or I'll pull you a card for some sort of donation or something. And you get, for every bit of donation, you get drawn an extra card, as if each card is its own little piece of currency. And I find that somewhat confusing and a bit bemusing. And as Melissa's saying in the chat, tarot is a tool for meditation, and within other tools, for example, meditation, contemplation, for some people prayer, for some people magic, ritual, and so forth. And Tony is saying, I normally get asked what this or that card means. Yeah, sometimes, not often these days, to be honest, but I get asked about the death card and stuff like that. And as Bill's saying, that you don't particularly use it for prediction, and then talk about the advisory angle. That's a nice way of putting it. There is a sense of talking about it for self-development and things like that seems to make a bit more less woo to people. It's been a while since I had anyone. I think it was maybe about 10 years ago, something like that I had someone, a group of people, a small group of people at one end of a table at a party that were very, very aggressively, in effect, trolling or taunting me and somebody else that I was with to read tarot. And then I remember them smashing some crisps, some chips on the table, and then saying, well, read that, and stuff. And obviously they were a little bit drunk and stuff, and the only thing you can do in situations like that is just remove yourself entirely from that. Yeah, and as Maria's saying, how the tarot can give you insight into the future. Well, that does come back to this idea about how tarot works. Now, there's a book called The Wild Pendulum by Itzhak Bentov, something like that. Itzhak Bentov, something like that. And there's a wonderful description in that of how a hologram works. Let me get a piece of paper and a pen. And, so I'm just looking for my magical flip chart. There we go. And if we've got a few minutes, I'll explain roughly how I tend to see tarot as working and how I see it as both non-spatial and atemporal. And if someone has a few minutes, then I sometimes have explained this to them, and sometimes it's sort of slightly rewired their brain, but this is partly the way Bentov explains holograms, but I think it's a nice way of seeing tarot as well. So let's imagine that this is a pool of water and you drop a stone into it. So I drop a stone here into a pool of water. Now, as we all know, the stone disturbs the surface of the water, and then it causes circular ripples that get wider as they move out. Yeah, so because they increase their resistance, they get slightly fainter and slightly wider, if I've understood my basic physics correctly, and so on. Okay, so one stone, one bit of water, and we all agree, right, okay, it makes some ripples, it disturbs the surface, it's like a disturbance in the force. But then, of course, if we drop another stone in the water, say we drop a stone here, as we know from basic schooling, that then starts to ripple out. But of course, when it hits this ripple here coming from this stone, then in effect we get a new point here, and we get a new point here, and we get a new point here, say. And then from that, form little mini ripples in what is known as an interference pattern. And of course, then obviously those ripples then hit the other ripples, and from each of those comes yet another even smaller, and then it starts to fractal out so that we get sort of little areas of chaos that appear to be chaos just because there's so many ripples interacting with each other. Yeah, so just 2 stones, and of course if we put 3 stones and drop a third stone in, then that ripple starts to come out. It's this one, and there's one here, but of course this ripple is now making more ripples which hit that ripple, and so forth, in ever widening circles out from that one, and this one here is now making sort of little ripples as well. Now, as Bentov says in The Wild Pendulum, so this is called The Wild Pendulum is the name of the book, and it's got some nice explanations of quantum physics and various other forms of cosmology and things like that in it. But as he says, if you then magically, or just scientifically, you don't need magic for it, flash froze the pond, just reduced it to like minus something, and instantly flash froze the entire pond, okay? Then you could take a chunk of the ice out, say this chunk here. Oops. So if we make a slightly odd square, and that chunk there, inside it, would have a pattern, for example, that would look like that. For example, if we just took this little area of the 3 stones ripple pattern. Now, as Bentov explains, this is a hologram. This is a holographic representation, because instead of light coming through and expanding outwards and interfering in patterns in waveforms or waves or particles, depending on quantum interpretation, then we've got water instead. So we've flash frozen it, and we've got this pattern here. And what we can do just from this pattern, if we only had that pattern, so if we sort of took that pattern out, let me just take that pattern out, like so. I don't usually explain it in this amount of detail if it's just in a bar. If we take that pattern out, let me just fold it around a bit, just tidy it up a bit. For some reason it's got a little T in it. There we go. Right, so we take that pattern out there, and what we can now do with this is take that away, and just from this alone work out the location of these 3 stones. Okay, those 3 stones are in the only positions that could have made that ripple pattern there. So from that ripple pattern unique section of the ripple pattern, we have the whole set of stones and all of the ripples in between. It's stored as information inside this particular pattern, but it's also stored in this pattern, in that pattern, in any pattern in that whole. We can take any section of it and work out the location of stones A, B and C, or D, or E. It doesn't matter how many stones. In fact, the more stones the better, and the smaller the slice can be. So, excuse me, just clearing my throat there. Now, what we can now do is imagine that this is a Marie, I'll just come on to that in a second, because if we imagine that this is a snapshot, okay, of these stones. Now, what we can now do is imagine through metaphor excuse me, my throat is still a bit sore from being ill for the last couple of weeks. So, if we imagine that that is a metaphor, then each of these stones is an event or is an action. Okay, so each of these can be an action, it can be a decision, an event, a thought, whatever it might be. Okay. Okay, so here's the thing. Everything is interconnected, okay? So we know that everything is interconnected. We now know that every single pattern is a part of the whole, but here's the thing that follows from this. And then we take a further leap from what this part of quantum physics is predicting or modelling, which is this. Imagine that when we have our tarot deck, our tarot deck is equally part of the universe. It is not disconnected. I'm not holding this tarot deck for in some separative dimension or pocket universe or anything else. I'm part of the universe. This deck is part of the universe. This deck is here now at 21:18 on Friday, 10th of October, above this table in front of this camera. And when I shuffle it, it is making one of these ripples. And more importantly, it is part, because each of these stones is part of the pattern as well, because we know that from any part of the pattern, it's connected to the stones. So, when I shuffle the deck, and this is exactly how I see the cards working as a practical model, when I pull that card, there we go. When I pull that card, and there's a wonderful image for exactly what we are talking about, it is connected to everything. And to answer Marie's question, and the way I explain it to other tarot card readers or people who are interested, this is now a tarot card. That is just as functional a tarot card as this one. because it is connected to the universe. And because of a magical experience, because of understanding the world through the lens of hermeticism and magic and divination, we know that time does not work as it appears. So here's the thing. Every single event is a stone dropped into this surface. But every stone, past, present and future, was, will drop simultaneously. This is not just non-spatial, like this is not directly connected to that. This card is not directly connected to our discussion or our reading. But as well as that, they are atemporal. This stone here could be past, present or future. It does not matter because it is all connected and happening simultaneously. It always was, it is now, it always will be. And this is that state of mind that you might enter into through Zen or through transcendental meditation or magical practice, deep trance, chemical assistance, whatever it might be, when you get into that all is one man, all is happening at the same time, everything is happening simultaneously, but we can't say that because it isn't happening. There's nothing and no time for it to happen within. That is our expression of it, that is our experience of it, because most of the time we live in a self-reflective, separative system that feels separate to everything else. But in the true state of unity, as it says even in the Hermetica, and when people casually quote, oh, as above, so below, as if they understand what that means just by quoting it, it's not just as above, so below, it's as within, so without, and as then, so now. It is a hermetic statement that things are connected atemporally and non-spatially. So at the same time and interconnected. Absolutely, Melissa. So this is how I see tarot actually working. And my experience of it is that's a reasonable map for it. That models what my experience has been over the last 45 years of doing readings. It is this card is connected to everything that has happened in the past. And because I've drawn it out and disturbed the air with my voice, and we've disturbed the air with our thoughts and our neural patterns and everything else that is chemically changing within us and everything else that is happening on the screens and with the light and so on. It is all connected. It's incomprehensibly vast and incomprehensibly interconnected. But when we abstract it just a little layer out, we don't have to know every molecule of paint on this card and its interactions at a quantum level or a light level to the reflection of the light in this room and how that's connected to the electric grid and a piece of coal that was formed 400,000 years ago. We just have a card with a picture on, and then we interpret it in terms of a question. And it doesn't matter to the cards, to me, to the person, to the universe, it appears to me, whether that question is about something that is not physically present in the room. This card is not connected to that person's decision about a job, or whether it is not apparently connected temporally, i.e. in the past, in the future. It doesn't matter to me as a reader, because this is the model that I have in my head. So it makes no difference whether it's a question about the past or the future. Does that make sense? That if we imagine the universe as a sort of quantum interconnected event happening simultaneously, which really means it's a solid state. The idea about, does a tree in the forest, if no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? It's even more profound, I think, than that, in that nothing is happening. Nothing has ever happened or will happen because there's nowhere for anything to go, to change, to move. That's why sometimes I don't refer to the universe, I just refer to universe, because there's nothing, by definition, outside universe to say the from. You can't have a subject that is everything, that is universe, because you can't refer to it from somewhere else. So it seems to me that this flash freezing of the entirety of existence is closer to the reality of things. And because of our process of awareness, process of consciousness, which is self-reflective to know itself, which is why, of course, the Hermetic dictum, or the dictum over the archway to the temple, is know thyself. Because know thyself, in those two words, is the entire secret of the universe. It is, the universe is knowing itself by its own reflexivity, by its own inquiry through everything that is happening into its very existence. And existence is that inquiry. So know thyself, again, a bit like that sort of idly quoting of as above, so below. If we assume that those dictums are absolute, divine, magical, mind-blowing truths, then we have to keep thinking about them until they blow our minds, until they open something that is so astonishing in our state and changes our state that we go, for the first time, within that, there is something true. There is something that could be testable. And this is really, every time I do a tarot reading, I think this is a good opportunity to test the theory. Are these things interconnected? And I just love the fact that the cards have come up with that card. As I didn't realise that the Five of Wands was the card of the holographic universe, but I'll think about that every time I see that card in future. So thank you, universe. Okay, I didn't know we were going to talk about that, but I hope that's been an interesting digression. But I think to come back to where we started, it's really important to have a elevator pitch for those standard questions. As a tarot card reader, if you're going to talk about tarot, or if people are going to ask you, and if you're not going to be cautious or concerned or anxious about talking about it, I think it's good to have some things in your pocket for what about the death card? How do you believe in tarot? How do you think tarot works? Or does tarot work? Yeah. And it doesn't matter. As Alice Crowley said, I don't know if the gods and demons that I evoke and invoke exist. I just know the universe acts as if they do. And I quite like that answer. It was certainly one I used for many years, and until I started to try and figure out my own models for things. That it was either, you can always answer that secret is reserved for a higher grade. That's the standard occult answer to asking someone a question that they don't know the answer to, is I'm afraid this secret is reserved for a higher grade. We used to joke about that in our occult order back in the day. or that it's sort of somehow incomprehensible or something like that. I think it's far better to say, I don't know, it just appears as if it does, and I'm happy enough with that, and to be confident in that. And to come back to that question about if someone breaks down during a reading, that may not seem connected to this discussion, but it is, in that I have... Teosophy is really built of 21 principles, but the whole model is very much about these two words, incorporate and utilize. The answer to everything in practical terms, when you're doing readings for people, is to incorporate and utilize. Always, this is from Neo-Ericksonian hypnotherapy. And it's sort of partly stated, partly taught, but I'm sort of distilled it out just for my own benefit, as incorporate and utilize. If someone is, and this goes with change work, hypnotherapy, counselling, or even a friend at a cafe who breaks down or something like that, one rule that I have when I'm teaching NLP is we never deny somebody their state. I think in terms of mental health, in terms of good practice, supportive friendship, counselling, change work, divination, fortune telling, whatever it might be, I think a very simple rule of human freedom is never deny someone, never attempt to deny someone their own state. I guess it's a sort of, nowadays it comes into this idea about gaslighting and things like that, I suppose. But I've always had it that you can't deny someone their own state anyway, but attempting to, like, there, I'm sure it's not that bad, is an example, a very clumsy example of trying to deny someone their own state. Oh, well, you don't look that serious, is another casual example of denying someone their state. So if someone breaks down during a session, then the very first thing we need to do is incorporate it, to state it, to own it, to bring it into the room and incorporate it, literally embody it. You can even sometimes mirror it or match it in some way, drop your voice, change your tone, do all sorts of things that incorporate it. The natural discomfort and anxiety about a situation where someone rapidly changes their state, for example, breaks down, suddenly gets angry or threatening or upset or shuts down entirely, gets really depresses themselves, contracts themselves, whatever it might be, is to go with it, is to incorporate it. And once you've done that, as long as you do it like honestly, openly, and even if it's somewhat clumsy, but it's better than nothing, and certainly better than denying them the state, is to say, I can see you crying. I can see your whole body's shaking now. And to incorporate it, to state it, to make it present, and not deny it at all, not try and move away from it like, oh, well, shall we talk about that later? Or I'm not going to deal with that now. Or pull yourself together. However you might try and avoid it, it's far better to drive straight into it and to incorporate it, because then we can utilize it. We can actually move from there to the source of it and really deal with it, transform it, change it, help the person reframe it in some way, adjust it, or even just pass through it themselves so that they can look at it afterwards in retrospect, if that's a better way for them to do it. But is to then really utilize it. So we might say something like, I'm just imagining doing this in a tarot card reading. So let's just take these 3 cards, just randomly. And again, I hope from that explanation you can see where the idea of there is hello Lissagal, welcome. No such thing as an accidental oracle. This comes in part from this model, the model we had on the other side of that piece of paper, and incorporate and utilize. And as Bird's saying, the tears can be leading us from or to something always. The reason that someone has brought that state into the present is because they're unconscious, usually more than they're conscious. Sometimes I've seen clients that their unconscious has brought them to me. Consciously, there's no particular reasoning that they're sat there, whether it's for NLP or hypnotherapy or for tarot or whatever it might be. Their unconscious has dragged them into that room. Milton Erickson, the hypnotherapist and doctor, he used to say that due to his medical ethics, that he wouldn't share the communications from the unconscious of the client to the client. That if he was working with incorporation and utilization with the deep unconscious of the client, often through very non-verbal ways or very interesting uses of language or trance work and so forth, and this happens with tarot as well, that the unconscious of the person, quite often we're working with that part that they're not aware of, that they're not conscious of. And sometimes we can use our language to work with that part of them. And as a result, as Erickson said, we mustn't then say to the client, well, your unconscious is actually suppressing that because of this, and that's because of what happened to you when you were 7, and that is manifesting in the way that you're holding your hands because you're actually self-comforting there and blah, blah, blah. Because if, as Erickson said, if the unconscious wanted it to be known to the client, to be helpful or to lead them somewhere or to teach them something or to help them change, it would have made it conscious. It would actually be conscious. So therefore, when we incorporate and utilize something, sometimes it's fine not to talk about it, as long as we utilize it, and we can do that through tarot. So, for example, a client has broken down. I've got these cards on the table. I'm just riffing on this, so let's see where it leads us. What might the client be doing? Who was mentioning that? Tony, actually, Tony. And it has happened. It has happened several times. And it's happened a lot in my hypnotherapy and NLP work. Sometimes you can say something to a person, just one sentence at the right time, and it will break them in half entirely when they're ready to deal with it, when you put the resources so that they can learn to incorporate and utilize that state. Yeah, so a deep dark situation for them. Well, the first thing to do, and to put a sort of context around this, is it really depends on the context. We are not counsellors unless we are. We are not therapists unless we are. We're not doctors unless we are. We're not legal advisors unless we are. We're not financial advisors or even career advisors. And yet we may be touching on all of those things during a reading. So usually what I would say, and again, it so much depends on the situation. It always comes down to incorporate and utilize. So if, for example, I was talking to a client and they started crying because I told them something about the Five of Cups, and that perhaps they'd actually, to some extent, they were mourning over a situation that would have actually been poisonous for them. And I don't go into a deep history of the fact that these cards are probably very badly coloured, and Pamela Coleman Smith didn't have any say in the colouring necessarily, and there's no good reason for these to be red and green. I'll just actually say to the client, and if you look, you can see that the water here is fresh and blue and moving, but the water here, it's not water, it's red and it's green, it's somehow unnatural and perhaps would have been bad for you, and you are mourning a situation that you need to move on from now and cross this bridge and get to something else, and we're going to take a look at how you're going to do that in the other cards. And then suddenly that touched on something that they weren't ready for, that I'm not ready for in the reading, and they just break down. Now, there's no singular rule for it, so I have a singular rule for it, which is incorporate and utilize. So I would let the person cry. I would, obviously, again, it's all going to depend on what's happening and how it goes. It could go all sorts of different ways, but for the sake of this example, incorporate and utilize. They might keep crying, and then they might look up at me and perhaps say something like, I don't know why I'm crying, or I'm sorry for crying, or I'm sorry. They might just say, I'm sorry, through the sobs. Now, incorporate and utilize, they've given us two words, and it's a bit like these stones that are falling in the water. They're part of the situation. They're not something we've got to get round or go through or go over or put to one side. We incorporate and utilize them within the reading. And we mustn't forget, as Lisa was saying, never be sorry for crying, which is exactly what I'm going to try and incorporate and utilize. But we must remember, we are only tarot card readers. We are only being paid, unless we're being paid for something else, as a tarot card reader. So it's easy to, it feels far more anxious, particularly the first time you try incorporate and utilize, to drive straight into the situation. But again, the answer is always in the question. The solution is always in the situation. It's always in the problem. As Bill is saying, if it's something out of your depth, then you'd suggest, have you considered professional counselling, as I'm not qualified for this? Absolutely. And I would say to someone, this is a tarot card reading and you're asking about your job. I can recommend you a few good books. For example, What Colour is My Parachute? I found very useful for career thinking, for searching for a job, for interview techniques and things like that. But I'm not a career advisor. The reading may suggest, and I would certainly suggest, you also taking career advice, reading up about it, and getting professional advice in that specific area, because I am going to give you a tarot card reading, and I'm hoping that this reading will give you some thinking outside of the box. As I might have said earlier on in the session, I feel as if I'm just a bit stuck in the box, and they might not have even said it. They might have just done it with their hands to say, I just really feel stuck. I'm in an office all day and I really need to get out of it. And then later on, I can incorporate and utilize that hand gesture and say, well, the tarot card reading, and I'll literally put my hands over the reading and say, well, we're going to open this box for you now. And I might even, as I take the tarot cards out of the box, say, let's just take these out of the box now and get them where we can see them clearly. And I will incorporate and utilize their own metaphor for being stuck, even though that was unconscious. They might have said, I feel stuck in my job, and made a box with their hands. Then I'm going to incorporate and utilize, from the moment they walk in the room, everything that they say. If they say, I've had a real problem parking, perhaps this client, the client who's crying, earlier on, they as they came in, they've said, I'm sorry I'm a bit late. Again, we hear that sorry again in the client. I'm sorry I'm a bit late. I had a real problem parking. And I'll say, oh, did you manage to find somewhere? Yes, I did eventually. Strangely enough, it was just right outside the building. I had to come round a few times, though, to find it. Someone just moved. Oh, that's good. I'll sit down, let's do the reading, blah, blah, blah. Half an hour later, they're sobbing away. This has touched on something, so we incorporate and utilize. We're a tarot card reader. We've got this card. That was the one that prompted the change of state. So now, knowing that all of the stones are part of it, everything is a part of everything, I would say, I'm not going to tell them, never be sorry for crying. I'm not going to say that to them, because that's denying their state of saying sorry. I'm now punishing them. I'm going to say, you've done wrong. Never, ever. I'm correcting them. Never be sorry for crying. And I know that would be a natural thing to say, but in NLP and hypnotherapy, and certainly in Tarosophy, quite often the things we say are not the natural thing to say. They're slightly more, shall I say, devious or constructed to get us somewhere else. So I would say, I can see that you're crying. We find our incorporate and utilize rules. We need to remember the rules. I can see that you're crying. I can't see that this character is crying. And we were covering this on the certificate class that I'm teaching at the moment for tarot, about saying what's literally on the card. I can't see that this character is crying, but I suppose they might be like you. I'm going to incorporate them as this figure. They might be like you, crying, not knowing even why they're crying. It's a little bit like the river here, and this bridge, these three cups. I'm just saying what's on the card, incorporate and utilize. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this yet, but I know that I'm not going anywhere wrong. I can't be, because I'm only incorporating and utilizing. They're crying, they've changed their state, they've said sorry for crying, They don't know why they're crying. I don't know why they're crying, but I do know that this is the card that has set it off with. And medicine in the shadow, yeah, we can go symbolic. That's another good way of bypassing conscious resistance, is to use metaphor and symbol. But obviously what we've got here, this is not a real river. These are not real cups. This is all symbolic as well. So we can talk in symbolic terms. Just by saying what we see, we're already removing ourselves and bypassing conscious resistance by talking symbolically. That's another secret trick that tarot card readers are using all the time that don't realise it. And storytelling, of course, which is a good healing technique as well. It's why we read books and watch films. So, the river then, so let's go and drop back into the scene. Back in the scene. I can see that you're crying, and I don't know if this character's crying on this card, and that will direct their attention to it, and I might even just tap my finger or point to the card. I don't know if this figure on the card is crying, but I imagine that they are, because they have lost these 3 cups. They have spilt something that may have been precious to them. And I'll say may have been precious. I won't say that's precious, may have been. And then I'll look at the client and see if that gets any reaction from them, whether they think it was precious or not. And they might just heave and sob even more, may have been precious to them. So now unconsciously I can see that they're losing something that they did think was precious but is no longer. And I'll say, like this river flowing is time symbolically. And I'll sigh, I'll give a heavy sigh, I'll raise my shoulders, incorporate and utilise their state, and I will drop my shoulders and say it's time, basically. And now, knowing whether you're crying or not, and that will help switch them from the crying state, because I'm symbolically and unconsciously suggesting that whether you're crying or not, I'm not saying stop crying, I'm saying whether you are crying or not, and now I'm giving them permission to change. I'm not saying, please don't cry, please don't say sorry, please, I'm not asking them to do anything. I'm reading the card, incorporating and utilising, whether you're crying or not. Time passes, doesn't it? I mean, it's passing even now. Even now, time is passing. And that, again, is bypassing conscious resistance, because I'm just stating something that is happening, incorporate and utilise. I'm now utilising and incorporating the passage of time. But I've tied it to this river. So, I don't know whether this character's crying or not, but I can see that they they've lost something that's precious to them. And like the river flowing, there's time passing. And perhaps it is time soon for them to cross this bridge when they're ready, when it's time now to do so. It's a little bit like sometimes you have to go round things several times before you can finally find the place to rest. And then I will incorporate and utilise what they said about parking when they walked in the room and they apologised for being late. Because their stones are always the same, like all of our stones. If they apologize for crying, they've apologized to this person for that situation that's caused the breakup, that's been part of a whole pattern in their life because they're coming from this stone. And it will be recapitulated, repeated in their behavior in the room itself. In the room itself. So they have apologized for being late. They've apologized for crying. We incorporate and utilize it in our healing story that is given to us by the tarot card. We are reading the tarot card. And I might say, sometimes you have to spill 3 cups. You have to go around 3 times before something opens up for you. And now I'm stating something that is entirely true and is in their recent experience. They had to drive round 3 times before suddenly, where they passed 3 times, now there's a parking spot. And then I might finish by saying, and then we can be really thankful. We can be thankful that we didn't drink this. We can be thankful, can't we, that sometimes there's a time to cry. And sometimes there isn't. And now I'm introducing to close the idea of being thankful. Not telling them about being sorry, but I want to give the option of being thankful, that we can see that sometimes we can be thankful, that eventually we have found our parking space. I'm not saying that consciously, but I'm using that as a metaphor with the cups, that it's time to move on. And we can be thankful. And I'm not denying it's difficult, because I've told them I can see that they're crying. I can see that it's affected them. I'm not telling them that one day you're going to feel really good about this. One day you're going to look back and think, oh, I dodged a bullet there. And tarot card reader was right, or anything. I'm never going to deny their state. And the trick is incorporate and utilize. Makes sense? And hopefully that model of how tarot works, or at least how it works as far as I tend to explain it to people, it allows us to have this idea of being able to bring things in. And so Melissa saying Kabbalah, it's very useful for connecting events and cards, and it's also useful in a sense, in a meta sense, as is every tarot card reading, of teaching us and reminding us that everything is always interconnected. My second occult teacher once said to me, why is it that the first time someone does a tarot card reading and it works, i.e. it tells them something that they couldn't possibly know about past, present or future, why doesn't that stop their entire universe? Why do they carry on doing tarot readings? Because surely once you've demonstrated that once, then the purpose of tarot card readings is fulfilled. It's shown you that the universe is entirely different to how you think, and you spend the rest of your life trying to resolve that, sort that out, work out how you're going to live in a universe that works like that. And to be honest, I mean, that's partly what I did for about 20 years is study Hermeticism and Kabbalah and all of the other things, and alchemy and magic, and experiment with ritual and ancient Egyptian ritual and the wide range of things to figure out, or to help me figure out, what sort of universe are we living in. And I think every tarot card reading is that. It's a question, what sort of universe are we living in? And as long as we incorporate and utilize what the client and the other person is giving us to answer Tony's question for this whole session, is we are incorporating and utilising both the inquiry and our experience of that inquiry. And we do that specifically with every tarot card reading, and so does the client as well. Phew. Okay, I wasn't expecting us to go anywhere like this today, but I hope that's been of interest to people. My guess practical advice from this is have a little pocket explanation of, do you believe in tarot? What about the death card? And how does tarot work anyhow? Even if it's, I don't know, I'm just glad that it does, or I don't know, but the universe seems to act as if it does, that is fine. Yes, that is the answer to everything. Stop asking questions. Yeah, well, when we stop asking questions, that is when, in that moment, your soul is lost. Okay, thank you. So next week we'll be doing this. Oh, just very quick thing just before we close. Two things, actually. Members only announcements, really. Thank you, Bill, and Birds. One is for those who joined during that promotional period for the Tarot of the Secret Dawn. We've had a load of issues trying to get some more decks because it was way oversubscribed, but I did want to send them out to everyone who was joining as members. Whether you stay a member or not, that's up to you. But Shay has now sent out all of the US ones, which we managed to cover with her stock. I have now sent out some of the UK ones. Oh, that's a nice way of explaining it, Hex. It is a method for gathering information that is normally unavailable. That is nice. And I've asked Shay to ship me over 7 decks that I need to fulfill the rest of the UK ones, something like that. I'll be sending everyone who has received a deck an email tomorrow to send them the PDF for the deck, the booklet that comes with it. No one needs to pay postage. We'll cover that because of the delay in sending them out. Don't worry about postage. That's all fine. I'm going to cover that. I do have some more on order, but unfortunately, the Game Crafter that we order them from, usually it's a month, but it's not going to be until December that they're going to arrive with me. Now, the ones Shay is sending me should get here reasonably quickly, and I should be able to send them out pretty quickly, but I'll be sending an email out to explain all of that over the weekend. The second thing is, in future, these lives, probably, if I can figure it out, because it's only just been released by YouTube, will transition to members only after half an hour. That is to say, the first, what's this gone out of focus? Come back, camera. Let's focus there, focus down there, there we go. That they've released a feature whereby you can set a timer in effect, so it'll be a free session for everyone, but then it will have some sort of timer that will say in half an hour this will go members only, and if you're still watching after half an hour or whatever the timer is set to, then it will then say, oh, we've gone to members only. If you want to join in the members only, then obviously join as a member, and it will encourage people to do that. That's going to be baked into YouTube because obviously they want to encourage people to start taking up memberships for channels that they would like to watch, because they are moving very much to a subscription system because they are now bigger than Netflix, streaming services, terrestrial TV, satellite TV, or cable. More people are now watching YouTube. They're aware of that, and they are building for us to eventually a lot of stuff that people will see without it being flooded with adverts on YouTube will be subscription in the future. Some creators are moving to members-only channels. They won't even do any free, in inverted commas, stuff. So I'd still like to do the public ones, and I'm going to be recording some sort of documentary style ones as well. But the regular lives will be, and it will work better for us as well, so that if you're a member, then we can have some ongoing conversations where we know roughly where we've got to with the discussions and things like that, and look at things in a bit more detail and all sorts of other cool stuff in the members only bit. And it saves me also having to do a members only video at one point and then doing the free ones at another point as well. So it will save save a lot of, it'll be more efficient in terms of time on my side as well. Okay, everyone, thanks a lot for sticking with me for the announcements, and I look forward to getting in touch with you about the decks, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And if you've got any questions, just drop them in the chat. We're still building all of the Discords. The subscription is to the channel personally. But I do think they'll be pushing the premium stuff as well. But they're not too interested in that, because obviously if you're not paying premium, then you're getting all of the adverts anyway, which is where they're making their money. Yeah, it's interesting times for YouTube, I guess. That's why they're pushing and putting us on these boot camps for membership. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Marie. Thanks, Birds. Thanks, Melissa, Sherry, and everyone else. Thanks, Tony, as well. Hurrah. Thanks, Bill. And yeah, have a great weekend. See you next week, or in the chat, or on all of our other surfaces, as they say, because we're not allowed to call them platforms anymore. Okay, take care, everyone. And as ever, the worker is hidden in the workshop. Bye for now.